The properties of nickel are as follows, right? Now, number one, nickel has good oxidation, right? Or nickel is a great or excellent oxidizing agent, basically meaning that nickel reacts well with the environment or atmosphere, particularly oxygen, right? When nickel reacts with oxygen, it forms a thin film known as nickel oxide, right? Now, this thin film known as nickel oxide, right, give rise to the second property of nickel, right, which is fundamentally uh, it is corrosive resistance, right, or it is anti-rust. It is not easy to basically rust nickel. Now, the third quality or the third property that nickel has, right? Now, when we look at pure nickel is a great conductor of electricity, right? Or basically, it has high quality electrical properties. And number four, nickel has this specific quality, right? Now I'm speaking about pure nickel, right? Pure nickel has excellent magnetic properties, right? For example, right, if we take a look at the cores, the Earth's core, right? The inner core and the outer core, right? The inner core and the outer core are fundamentally made up of two minerals, right? Or two elements. It is iron, right? And nickel, right? It is particularly this nickel which creates a magnetic field which protects us from the cosmic radiation, right? That might hit the earth. When nickel is used as a battery material, right? It tends to have an impact of this nature. Number one, it enhances the performance of the battery. Number two, it increases the life of the battery, basically increasing longevity. Number three, it basically improves the storage, the ability of the battery to store energy, and it improves the energy density which can be delivered by the battery. When we look at the nickel global market, right, there's about 186 mines globally which are supplying this market, right? Now, about 127 of these mines are found in South Africa, which places South Africa as the leading nickel producer globally. Now, in Africa, nickel can be particularly found in a number of areas. Number one, in Tanzania, right? They are planning to start mining a huge nickel deposit that they have found in a province of Kabanga. There is nickel in Zimbabwe, right? You can also find nickel in Zambia. Um, Ivory Coast also stands as a notable country that has nickel deposits, right? And Madagascar. There are two types of nickel, right, that exist in the market, right? The first type of nickel is known as class 1, right? When you speak of a class 1 nickel, right, you are fundamentally speaking of a nickel that has a purity level of 99.8%, right? So it is 99.8% pure nickel, right? This type of nickel, right, is particularly used in the construction, right, and the manufacturing of batteries, particularly those which are used in electrical vehicles. Now, number two, right, it is known as the class 2 nickel, right? Now, when we speak of class 2 nickel, we speak of a nickel which is not necessarily 99.8 pure, right? It's anything below 99.8% purity, right? The class 2 nickel is particularly used in steel production and pig iron production, or reducing impurities in the pig iron, right? So the class 2 is mostly used for structural members and infrastructure. Now, in order for us to achieve the desired purity of nickel, right? Nickel has to go through a number of stages, right? You first mine the nickel, right? And then you process the nickel, and then you smelt the nickel, right? And then what's the last process? You basically refine, right? Refine the nickel, right? Now, it is known that in order for you to be able to refine nickel to its purest level, right, the whole process will release about 18 tons of carbon dioxide to produce 1 ton of class 1 nickel, right? So let me say that again, right? Right? To produce 1 ton of nickel, right, in its purest form, right, 18 tons of carbon dioxide are released, right, to the atmosphere. 18 tons is quite a large amount of carbon being released, right, using conventional processing, refining, and smelting methods, right? So, as a way forward for the nickel market industry, right, nickel must find cleaner ways, right, to access their nickel, right, and purify it, right? Now, I have discovered a method, right, not necessarily being used a lot, right, known as agro mining, right? Agro mining is fundamentally the using of plants, right, to extract minerals from the ground, right? You use plants known as hyper accumulators, right, which are fundamentally plants in which you can plant in an I'd say a nickel rich ore body, right? And then as the trees goes, they suck and extract the nickel from the ground. This process is quite clean, right? And it can be basically used where there is less than 5% parts per million of nickel that you can find in the ore, right? Now, when we look at commercial endeavors by big companies, right, you must have a level of about 10,000, right, parts per million of whatever mineral that you want to mine, right? But with the agro mining methods, you can mine, right, and plant trees in areas where you can find a parts per million which sits at about 5,000 parts per million rather than 10,000 parts per million. The nickel can go to a point where you can also just use agro mining on land which has about 1,000 nickel parts per million. So this method, right, of mining nickel, right, particularly turns non-commercial, non-profitable ore bodies and deposits, right, into something that we can explore for profit and ultimately community development, right?